Haunted lot. After the shadow incident, I never get to experience anything again inside our house. But I did experience supernatural things outside on our street, and this time I experienced it with my friends. My friends and I usually meet to play at around 3 to 4 p.m. until 6 to 7 p.m. or until 10 p.m. if there's a party at one's house. We were aged around 6 to 9 years old at that time, and I was the oldest. We don't usually ring each other's doorbells or shout the names of our friends outside their homes to play. We just hang in front of their house and wait for them to peek outside to know we are waiting for them to come out and play. One day, we met around 3 to 4 in the afternoon. There were 4 of us, not real names: Kinito, 6 years old, Roger, 7 years old, Sion, 8 years old, and me, 9 years old. Sion and Roger are cousins, and I was the only girl in the group. There were still a lot of vacant lots back then, but now the street is almost full of houses. After meeting in front of our house, we talked about what we were going to do that day. Since there was a new house being built on our street, we decided to play there with the workers, as we know it's their break/merienda time, and since we were still kids and really mischievous, the workers don't seem to mind whenever we're at the site as long as they weren't working. When we got to the site, which was just 4 lots away from my house, we noticed that the site was quiet and the straw door was closed. As I said, we were mischievous back then, so we still went inside by opening the door. The construction site was empty and no one was in sight. Since we have an active imagination, we thought that maybe they were hiding from us, knowing that we were going to come at that time of the day. I came up with the thought that maybe they were hiding behind the walls, the wall that separates each street of the subdivision. The site was big, maybe around 400 square meters, so it may take 30 seconds or so for us to reach the wall. As we were about halfway to the wall when we passed by the makeshift hut made of plywood, the battery-powered radio suddenly turned on by itself. A moment just before the radio turned on, I heard a nail fall from where the house was being built. It was just several meters away from us. The house just consisted of columns, floor, and stairs at that time, so we can easily see if someone was there, as there were no walls. It confused me as to why a nail would fall from somewhere inside the unfinished house, since no one was there. I thought that maybe it was because of the wind, but it was impossible as there was barely a breeze then. I also thought that maybe a bird nudged it, but I never saw a bird fly away from where the noise was. Back to the radio. The radio was placed hanging near the roof outside of the makeshift hut, which was maybe 6 feet high. Me being the eldest and tallest of the group, almost 5 feet, I was the only one who could reach it if I stand on the bench just below the radio. But since I was beside my friends, neither of us touched the radio. The hut's door was open, so we thought that maybe the radio was remote controlled and one of the workers was inside the hut controlling it. Kinito decided to check inside while the radio was still playing, but told us that no one was there. After he came back to our side, the radio turned off by itself again, and that's when we started to get scared. Since it's clear that no one was there at the site, we scrambled out of the site and ran to Sion and Roger's house, which was just beside ours. After an hour or less, we saw the workers pass by in front of our houses, at Sion's and mine, back from the Sorry store. All of them were on their bikes. Months after the house was finished, my friends and I befriended the caretakers, a couple, of the house. Since the owner of the house isn't always there, the caretakers allowed us to play inside the house's wide garden. It has a small pond in the middle and they even have a pet tortoise just roaming around the area. The couple mentioned that they've been experiencing things inside the house whenever they're alone, so they allowed us to play in the garden to help lessen the house's eeriness. After they mentioned their experiences, we said that there is something there as we also experienced it when the house was just being built. One day when my aunt and I were taking an afternoon walk, my aunt decided to chat with the caretakers. They were talking about having the house blessed as the supernatural occurrences were getting worse, like things getting thrown out of nowhere. As they were talking in front of the gate, I suddenly heard something on the house's second floor, as if a book suddenly fell flat on the floor. My aunt and the caretaker also heard it, and I asked the caretaker if Sniffles the pug owner's pet was there with them. She said no, followed by, "See what I mean?" After that, they have the house blessed by the pastor from our church. My aunt was an usher back then. This was the last encounter I had on that subdivision before we moved out to another subdivision due to family reasons. Thanks for reading. Who was that? I have been reading stories here for a couple of months now, anonymously, but now I finally decided to post my personal experiences. It was really interesting to read other people's stories, but what really pushed me to post my story here is the community and members' responses. I hope someone can find my story interesting, and hopefully someone can get me some answers too. This happened about 2 to 3 years ago, when I was still a senior high school teacher. I have a class that I was assigned to, and within 2 months they are about to graduate in high school. This year, before they graduate, our school decided to implement a camping instead of a field trip. Every student was ecstatic for having a camping for 3 days and 2 nights in the mountains all to themselves, with only few selected teachers and staff. When the day came for the camping, all faculty that are involved in the event had to come in early at school for preparations. It was around February that time, a bit cold in the mornings, and it was chilly, around 5 in the morning, when I came in our campus. I thought I arrived too early since there was no one else in the school, empty parking lots, besides the guards, so I decided to open up the faculty room and wait for the rest of the teachers to come in. Our school is actually a very well-known university in our province. It has a lot of branches and extension schools all throughout the region. The campus I work for is the main one. It was the oldest and first campus of the university, and the senior high school facility is located inside the administrative buildings and engineering colleges building. So I had to walk inside a lot of corridors just to get to our office. Beside our faculty office is our principal and guidance offices. When I arrived at our faculty room, there were no lights yet, indicating that I was the first one to come in. So when I opened the door, I immediately opened all the lights. Actually, I'm not afraid of the dark. Everything looks normal, so I came straight to my desk and decided to start making coffee while waiting for other people. After just a few minutes, just around 1 to 2 minutes actually, someone passed by the office. I saw someone walking because we had a large window in our office to see people outside. I instantly knew that the person is heading to the principal's office, so it might be either the guidance counselor or the principal. I wasn't surprised by that, but surprised that they will be too early to come into school. After another minute, I decided to go to the restroom outside, then head to the principal's office to greet whoever came in. When I was done in the loo, I saw our principal heading towards his office, so I followed him. But when I got to his office, he was nowhere to be found. I entered his office and the lights was still off. I was really shocked by that moment, and I almost jumped out of my skin when our guidance counselor greeted me "Good morning" from behind. She saw me surprised and clutching at my chest, but only smiled at me and greeted me, "You're so early today. Did you start preparing for the camping?" I only answered her, "Yes, I only came in a couple minutes ago and just opened the faculty room, but no one else is there yet." "Have you seen the principal?" She was setting up her things on her table just beside the principal's room when she said, "Not yet, I'm sure he will come in before 6 a.m. today." I only mustered to say, "Oh, okay." I decided to go back to the faculty office and think. Who had I followed? What was that I followed? I was so sure that it was the principal. I didn't have much time to think when another faculty member came in, one after another. Then our principal came in and checked our preparations before leaving. I wasn't sure how to react when I saw him, especially wearing a different polo shirt. I couldn't get it off my mind, and I'm the type of person who doesn't like keeping secrets, so I talked to him and the guidance counselor and other teachers before leaving school for camping. They only reacted a bit worried but wasn't surprised anymore because they know that our school has a lot of paranormal occurrences, especially the principal's office. They just told me that day that there used to be a ghost of a kid who likes to prank people through his window. After I let it out and talked about it, I managed to breathe normally again. When I saw my students getting excited that morning, I was excited again in camping and put what happened behind my back. But deep inside, I still want to know what was it that I experienced.
Scrub shoes. I've been a lurker YGS for years already. Ghost stories gives me too much ecstasy, but ironically, I am phasmophobic. I get to see several entities I never really knew if was part of my playful imagination or genuinely real. Here goes one of my many experiences. I live in a slums area in Pasig, year 2012. I was on my way home from work and it was around 8 p.m. There was a light rain that time. I got off from a jeepney and parted ways with my office mate. While I was walking under the rain, it was very dark, and no other people can be seen walking around the area. A minute later, there was a female nurse walking behind me, holding an umbrella and wearing scrub shoes. I felt relieved as I get to have someone accompany me on that eerie night walk under the rain. There came my turn in the alley. I was really hoping she get to turn too so I can have someone to walk with. It wasn't a really long alleyway, but at the other end of it, there was this man drunk walking. I got nervous, so I took a glance on the lady behind me and felt relieved again after seeing I still have company. I walked in a hurry hoping to grab the rest I wished to have the soonest. As I walk faster, I can hear the lady's footsteps get faster too. I was puzzled and thought that maybe we're both nervous of what the drunk man could do to us. I took another sight for a couple of times, and she was there. She's really copying the pace of my steps as I can hear her scrub shoes squeaking. Still puzzled, I had my fifth look at her and alas, she's gone. In an alley? With no other pathways. Goosebumps all over my back, I ran as fast as I could to get home. All the people in the house panicked seeing me in such a pale staring off space state. After a few minutes, I was able to tell them about my encounter with the nurse. They immediately went outside to look for the lady I saw. But as expected, none. Until the next morning, they get to ask the neighbors if they knew someone who works in a hospital in the area, and yeah, not a single soul they knew. Until now, I still don't know if it was just my imagination, but I've been battling with the thought that I get to take a glance, plenty of times, at her and hear her footsteps for real.
Elemental or ghost. My story happened in a rural subdivision along the northern suburb of Dumaguete City in the province of Negros Oriental in the Philippines. This story took place sometime in 1992 when my wife's mother died from multiple organ failure. After laying in wake for a week in a funeral home in Dumaguete City, my mother-in-law's remains were brought to their house a day before the interment so that her neighbors could pay their last respects. And it was also a local custom to bring the remains of dead person back to his or her abode as a form of last farewell before he or she is buried. My mother-in-law's house was actually a few meters away from my residence. Only a single residential lot separated our houses. On the day of the interment, the funeral procession was scheduled to start at 1 p.m. from their residence to a nearby Catholic church for the funeral mass. And from there, the remains will be brought to the cemetery in Dumaguete for burial. At that time, I was already exhausted from sleep deprivation since I was on the overnight vigil watch at the funeral parlor after coming home from work. My wife and our children spent the daytime hours on vigil and went home at night to sleep. This shifting schedule went on for a week. I begged my wife that I be exempted from the funeral procession so that I could catch on my sleep, and I will just catch up later on at the funeral mass. Having slept the entire morning at our house, I was already slightly awake by noontime. So, there I was, relaxing on our bed with the cassette radio playing some soft music on the bedside table. Yes, this is the same cassette radio in my previous story, Elementals, who hated loud noises. And the radio was on, radio, FM, mode with the volume turned low. At exactly 1 p.m., I heard people's voices, footsteps and the sound of the hearse's motor emanating from my mother-in-law's house indicating the start of the funeral procession. As the cortege passed by our front gate, the radio on our bedside table suddenly fell silent. I thought some power failure took place, so I immediately turned on the lampshade that was also on the bedside table to check if a blackout occurred. The lampshade's lamp went on. The hair on the back of my neck stood up from fright when I discovered that the radio selector toggle switch was shifted from the radio to the tape position. I also recalled hearing a clicking sound when the music stopped. I hurriedly dressed up and proceeded outside to join the procession. Until this day, I am still pondering if an elemental or a ghost did this. Some people say it was my mother-in-law who played a practical joke on me as her last goodbye.
Mom Stories, Mysterious Beasts. I haven't experienced anything worth noting for a long time, and though I've always been curious about supernatural things, I'm not one to wish for it to happen. The most recent, I guess, was last February when overnight, a pair of footprints appeared right on the ceiling of the hotel room I was staying in. It could be anything, really, and the hotel was old so. Oh, also last month, I was working really late preparing for an event the next day. It was 2 a.m., I was alone in the office. I started singing a song from the movie Yentl when suddenly the restroom door slammed shut. There wasn't a draft or anything, but still it could be anything. Only one AC was working and it was on the other side of the room. I don't consider it really out of ordinary, though some folks might really get scared. What I wish to share is the most unexplainable. And Mom has loads. I'm very careful of sharing second-hand accounts, but my mom really has recurring and curious stories. When she was in high school, she would stay alone at home and study. Like me, her favorite time was dusk. She would sit in their room facing a veranda. This was on the second floor of their house in the province. One time she said she felt something watching her. When she looked out into the sky, the veranda was at least 12 feet across. Something caught her eye. Peeking through the veranda railings to the left were a pair of dark eyes. She looked closer and there was a snout. When she tried to figure out what it was, it moved a bit and she noticed there were paws clinging to the flooring between the railings. She thought it was a dog, but when she remembered she's on the second floor, she bolted right up, and the thing left as a dog would. only that it would have been a really gigantic dog. She went downstairs to call her siblings, but it disappeared when they looked out the window. In our family, we don't chalk things up to something more normal, or express disbelief when one experiences weird things. Worse, kids would try to scare each other, and if you're not a sport, you'd really cry. Of course, that is if the older ones don't catch the bullies first. Older folks would really warn everyone not to make fun of such things. Anyway, so my mom would share stories that are really hard to explain. I told you one story about how my mom thinks I was born with a scar. One night, when she was pregnant, she was then carrying my big brother. My dad verified this story. They were already living in the city, and this was mid-80s. She heard something scratching on her bedroom door. She woke my dad up and she said something really sinister was trying to get in. Well, my dad had been gifted by older people with a blessed belt. My father was a writer and he received gifts from communities. One of them is this belt for his travels, which was probably doused with holy water. Anyway, so my dad didn't have a gun. And my mom insisted it was some sort of animal trying to get in. He took the belt and opened up the door to a really big cat, about the size of a beagle. He lashed at it with a belt. I almost felt bad about it, but the most shocking thing was when it was hit, it screeched and flew right out, all the way through the front door. There was a hallway, then the living room, and then the front door. It really did fly close to the ceiling on the way out. Outside the front door, there were garden chairs where my uncles and aunts were then sitting sharing stories when they were surprised by what looked like a black thing screeching, zooming past. It went out into the night. One of my uncles lived with us and their cousins were living next door, so they were hanging out in the front porch. Needless to say, the house was a bit shaken, and I could imagine them all staying up, talking about what the heck just happened. Whatever it was, it sure was weird. There are other stories about strange beasts that look like ordinary ones until observed closely. It was common then, before the sprawling urbanization changed the landscape and probably whatever is living in it with us human beings. Thank you for reading.